Hello, today I'll be looking at this new product from Eachine, but just before we get into that, as always, a quick reminder, please like or dislike this video if you didn't like it, comment down below, don't forget to subscribe, and if you can find it, it's hiding there somewhere, click that little bell icon, it might tell you when I'm uploading videos. So what have we got here? It is a new little quad from Eachine. Not as little as the others, 115mm this time, and it's called the Eachine Twig, and it looks like this. They've kind of taken the toothpick vibe and grown it, which is kind of goes against toothpick. It's more micro quad, but they've kept the two-bladed props. But anyway, let's get the big boy out straight away. It is this. Now, it actually comes in a couple of flavours. This is the one, and it's got the Runcam Nano 2 camera in, which is a pretty good FPV camera. There is one which has got the baby Calyx turtle in, if you want to do HD recording. But yeah, it's a bit of a little beastie, this one. Much sort of thicker frame for a micro. Obviously bigger props. These are 30-25 bi-blades, although they just about clear that canopy. And they do look quite sizable, and they're not too floppy, which is all good stuff so far. So this is going to run 2 and 3S. I thought at first this might be 4S because these are 1105 5200 kV motors, but at 3 inches that is a 3S motor. It's got the now normal diagonal stack with the USB connector underneath, which as we start getting bigger quads, I kind of prefer it if they were like little, 16 or 20mm stacks rather than these diagonal ones. And this has got the, as many people would say, the dreaded Crazy Bee board with a little tiny antenna here which has got the SPI receiver built in. But good news on this one is I think they've twigged finally that we're not enjoying the SPI receivers because they can sort of lose signal very quickly. And you can obviously replace that with an external receiver, but what they've actually done is they've put on this little cable. And this little cable links to an S-Bus connection, so if you've got an external receiver ready to go, plug that in. That might be sort of, it looks FreeSky RXSR sort of size. You can plug that in and you can basically zip tie or do something to put your receiver on the back there. Anyway, the other stuff this got a VTX that speaks smart audio and goes from 25 to 200 milliwatts. F4 flight control, of course, in that Crazy Bee. The angle of the camera is ultra ball, although that's just about maxed out at the moment. There's a couple of little screws to be able to loosen it up. Once again, they've gone with quite a large battery strap here, and they haven't got any nice silicone pad there to stop the battery wiggling about, which is a little bit of a pain. Elsewhere in the box, while we're looking, a sheet of instructions with full colour pictures. The Eachine instructions are pretty good now, actually. They're getting a lot better. We have a spare set of props and a couple of foam pads rather than silicone. I'm guessing that's for the battery, which is better than just raw carbon, but it could be better still. And you've got a couple of spare parts there, little Allen keys, some screws, bits and pieces like that. You don't get a battery with it. It seems like it might be a bit too much for those little, well, my little 300 milliamp hour high voltage batteries, mostly because they're all knackered these days. But I'll put a few in and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, looks quite interesting. Looks a little bit different again. Everything's sort of a bit different now. It goes into one sort of flavour, and the flavour was toothpicks, and they seem to getting bigger as people want more from it. And this is starting to turn into like not quite your regular 3-inch, but a sort of reduced version of it, which is at least nice and light. Weight wise, this is 60 grams without the battery, so well under any of the limitations that are coming in. But yeah, let's crack this up on Maiden Flight and see what we need to set up, and we'll take it out for a fly. Okay, well, let's plug the Twig in and let's see what we've got here in Maiden Flight. And there it is, all in glorious wiggling around. So, ports, as you'd expect, nothing much is happening. It's SPI, so we haven't got CRX set up, but of course you do have that cable there if you want to connect one, and then it's much easier than having to solder onto the board. So, configuration wise, motor stop is on, jolly good. D-Shot 600 is there. It's an 8K loop. The CPU load is quite high. I don't like it that high. So what will I be changing? Well, arming angle's good. I'll be changing the personalization to my own name. It's set to FreeSky D, which is a D8 version, which is really the one you want it to have, because FreeSky X, which is D16, tends to overload it even more and fall out of the sky. OSD, anti-gravity and dynamic filter on, that's good. I'll be putting on RX set, but we'll come to that afterwards. Power and battery, it's set, it's a bit better. Yeah, that's not too bad. Minimum cell voltage can probably drop a bit because these batteries do sag. Max cell voltage I normally put about 4.5 on these ones that can take HV. PIDs look like they've been messed with a bit just because the Super 8 is at 7.6 and we've got a difference in max velocities there. We'll put those up to 0.8 so I can get about 1,000 on each way. Receiver, I have bound it and the channel map is TAER instead of EATR. The sub trim seems slightly off but not crazy off. The modes they've given us are just arm, angle and air mode. I like the fact air mode is on a switch. That's my way of thinking again. Maybe they're occasionally watching and listening. Yeah, even the OSD looks vaguely familiar. Got all nice stuff laid out in the corners. I'm not one for getting current draw and milliamp hours. I'll be getting rid of that, making it more normal. This is the dreaded Crazy Bee F4R board. A lot of people have said theirs blow up. I've had about 9 or 10 of these now. I still have one yet to fail. Maybe that's going to be tempting fate, but we'll see. The one thing I'm going to check on this as well is, I think the last Eachine quad I had, which I can't remember what it was now, I went down the act of sort of adding in beepers, D-Shot beepers, and then I found that the version of BL Heli wasn't high enough, so I'm going to check that out now. Now, to be perfectly fair to the instructions, they do mention about going into BL Heli Suite in case you need to upgrade the software, but they don't suggest what their software should be on. I mean, obviously I'm looking for it to be on at least 16.67, which is the one that starts supporting the D-Shot commands. And it is on, yeah, it's on 16.5. Why are they letting us out with this? So let's do an upgrade here. Flash all, that would be a better thing to do, wouldn't it? Oops. 16.7 official. Flash. Of course, if you didn't want to go into BL Heli and check it, you could always just set the beeper on, and if it didn't work, then that's a sort of prompt for you to go and look at this and flash it if necessary. Bearing in mind that there's no external beeper and these can disappear in nothing, it's definitely worth upgrading the BL Heli software just to have those D-Shot commands. They really are useful just for finding it in those last couple of feet. So welcome, here we are to fly the Twig. As per usual, we've just got one day in the week which is flyable. It's a bit windy, and although the sun's out, it's so low, I don't think it's going to get beyond the trees, so we're going to have shadow all the way. Good test for the camera, which is the Runcam Nano, which is pretty good. Not brilliant, but pretty good. So yeah, let's fly this. Now, battery wise, I've got a few. I kind of feel the right size for this one is something like a 450 up to about 500 free cell, which is this one. I only got the one though, so I do have a bunch of the little 300 milliamp hour high voltage batteries, which I think are a little bit small, and then I've got these rather excellent 650 AC batteries, which are a bit big but might be okay for cruising around. Yeah, I think the way to go is just to have a try and see how it feels, and we can adjust accordingly. So let's get on with it. So off we go with our maiden flight, and I'm just showing a few of the little passes we did there. I'm starting off with the 300 milliamp hour high voltage 3S battery, and I'm starting off really just getting a feel for it, because it does fly a little bit differently from the normal toothpicks. It's a little bit heavier, it's got quite different props, and this is basically only a good thing, whereas the very sort of thin and flexible 65mm props on the normal toothpicks made these things really oscillate and have some problems at high throttle. This one feels a lot more stable. It's got a lot sort of bigger props, and it's a little bit more substantial, so it's getting quite a smooth ride there. I'm fairly happy with that. The slight horror of using once again one of these SPI receivers I'm not enjoying too much. I mean, look at the RSSI. I wanted to see if I could at least get to the end of the strip of land here, which is only sort of 100 meters ish, because it needs to do at least that much. As we're scaling up and getting slightly larger quads, the use of these things is starting to get to me a bit, because it's just not as suitable as a proper receiver. But yeah, it's got that way, at least forwards, and I will just check if I can fly it reasonably behind myself. Liking the camera, I think that's quite good. I'm enjoying the Runcam Nano 2. I think they're quite a nice little budget camera. Things look a little bit reddish sometimes, but nothing like the Caddx ones. So this is coming out really quite nicely in that sort of term. And it feels pleasantly acrobatic through the trees, and it tends to hang on a little bit more in the corners. Those first very sort of skinny propped toothpicks, they tend to drift out a little bit more. This thing is a bit more locked in, at least. So pretty much I flew around here just to use up the first battery. The idea being to try some different things, different batteries, that sort of thing as I went. So I did a couple of maneuvers. You can see this battery is being very, very tortured, and brought it in just around the 3-minute mark. Well, I think that's a good start point. It flew pretty nicely. A little bit of oscillation in certain places, but that's probably the wind coming in. Couldn't get that much speed. I might look at cranking up the camera angle. There's not that much room in there to do anything, and obviously that battery was sagging a bit. These batteries have been abused, but I think certainly the larger one might do better, so I'll try the 450 next. And although at 25 milliwatts it looks pretty good, we'll try upping that just to see how the picture looks as well. So for flight 2 I switched over to that 450 milliamp hour regular 3S, and I've upped the camera a little bit. But when I took off, I realised, aside from the fact I had a little bit more static in the VTX, I realised I forgot to up the power, and perhaps that distracted me and made me crash. So I've upped that power now, and it does quite a sensible thing. When you're disarmed, it switches the power to 25 milliwatts, and when you arm, it switches it to that full power. Now, you would have seen some weirdness on the display there, and this is part of the reason I wanted to show that landing I did. I think this is responsible for it. What happened in this battery is basically the VTX degraded. It started out okay, and then we started getting some lines like this, and it started feeling not so good. And I think what happened is either on that initial landing where I landed in the grass, not particularly deep grass, but it was wet, or when I had that crash into the bush, there's a certain amount of water that went onto the VTX. It's quite exposed, and this started having, I think, an impact. Basically, we started getting some shorts or some range issues or something, because essentially we got a lot of noise starting to come into the camera, and it was very unpleasant to fly in and made me feel like, you know, bad things were going to happen. So I brought it down pretty quickly to inspect it after this bit. Basically had a wipe down of what I could see was any wetness in there, and again I took off and things are looking okay, but as I went further on we got more noise in there, and I wondered, you know, is this because I've upped the power to 200 milliwatts? Perhaps that's the problem. So again I decided to bring it in, put the power back down to 25 milliwatts, see if that was going to cure what I was getting here. And the quick answer to that question was no. I don't know if you've ever tried flying when half your display is over the wrong side. It's not easy, and made me crash. So then I thought perhaps it's the rapid fire module. So I changed the rapid fire to legacy. I asked it to put the little display in when everything was good, and gave that a go, and no, it's just not working. So I decided to call it quits, take it home, clean it out, let everything dry before I just did more damage to it. So cleaned it all out, dried it up, and 1 week later I had another window, and I didn't even take off because I could see what was happening as soon as I turned the throttle on. Not good. So back home I went for another week or so, and came back out after taking the entire thing down, putting it back together, not finding a problem. I take off, I'm still getting this rolling problem. But what I did this time is, because I wasn't getting any of this big noise, it looked like a different issue. So I did decide to bring it down, put my rapid fire goggles into legacy mode, which wouldn't try and do the clever matching up of different frames and stuff, and give it another go with that and see if that helped me. Because certainly
it wasn't right. The initial battery flew on proper rapid fire mode, but it didn't seem to have all that horrible noise that we had last time. So here we are again for Maiden Number 3. And while we look at this Maiden Number 3 take part, and I'm flying with 200 milliwatts again this time, I think it's fair to say about the timescales involved in this video. That smiling person unboxing the video, the quad at the start of the video, that was filmed on the 25th of September. Because of the commitments and the weather, I was able to go out and maiden it on the 13th of October. And then when it got wet and had a problem, I had to wait for another weather window, and so I got out for that part 2 of the Maiden, that flight that wasn't a flight and literally was at the field for 2 seconds before I had to go home again. 27th of October, and this last flight was filmed on the 8th of November. I'm speaking to you now on the 13th of November, so we're looking at about a month and a half worth of attempting to get this review out. So if you've seen reviews of this before and you're wondering, thinking, God, why has he got it so late? The answer is I didn't. I've just had problems trying to get out and review it because of conditions outside and what was happening with quad and other commitments. That's been it, basically, unfortunately. I do so miss the summer when you could go out most days and you didn't have to wait 2 weeks just to, fly in a crappy strip of land. Anyway, so the Maiden Number 3 of this quad is going okay. I'm actually flying with one of the 650 milliamp hour 3S's. This is perhaps a bit big for it. I feel 500's maybe about the right size, but at that same time it wasn't having a problem. It wasn't feeling particularly sluggish, and it was big enough that I could actually put an external beeper on it as well, which suited me down to the ground, because these are so easy to lose, and the tendency, if the VTX craps out, is going to be to crash it in all sorts of nasty places. But yeah, so same story really as last time. It's pretty smooth. It can take a bigger battery. I'm not 100% convinced that this VTX isn't dead. I'm getting noise where I wouldn't necessarily expect it, and it's not playing well with rapid fire mode. That said, it's bearing up okay, and it's letting me do quite a lot with it. The problems we've got really with this quad is more one about it feels like it's a larger, more capable quad, and you don't want to keep it in this tiny little space. You want to go out further and mess around, have some good fun with it. But where this RSSI value is so low, it gives you a real sort of worry about doing anything like that. You can see as well in this particular flight, the conditions weren't as nice. We're very overcast now. I mean, it's just rain and wind constantly. Welcome to England. But yeah, it's holding up really nicely, and certainly for a 650 milliamp battery. As I said, it may be a little too big, but I got a good 5.5 minutes out of it, and that's not taking it easy. That's going out all over the place. And I bought myself a landing mat this time to protect from the rain. So I was expecting great things from this, and I plugged in another battery ready to get some good fun, ready to maybe change locations, try some different stuff out, really have a good time, because this quad flies pretty nicely. I'm pretty impressed with it. And here's where it all went a bit wrong, because all that happened is I just flew in a spot where the coverage of the antenna wasn't very good, just a little bit behind me, blocking, and we get RX loss, and we go down, and the quad is covered with mud, and I have to stop.
Well, here we finally are, and here's the quad, almost a week later, and you can see it's still covered in mud. I don't know about you guys, do you ever get that thing where something's upset you, and so when you come in you just kind of shove it in the corner and ignore it? This is kind of what's happened with this quad. So I still need to clean out all that mud and stuff, but I just looked at it and it was just wet through, it was covered in mud. I was like, that's not flying again. But then I had even more disasters on the day. I'll come to that in another video. But yeah, I kind of finished like I haven't done enough with it, because I've only had 2 proper decent flights in a month and a half. Blame everything I've mentioned because of that. But I feel I've got the general gist of it. And I have to say, this actually flies really nicely. What I said before about these being more substantial props, it being more substantial quad than your sort of toothpick style, really does make a difference. You don't get any of that nasty flutter when you're doing high throttle. It's a bit more substantial, it's not buffeted about quite so much. That bit works really nicely. The camera's pretty good, I like that. The VTX, I didn't really get a chance to see what the VTX could do until something happened to it and it went horribly wrong. Even in that last flight when it was okay, there was still a bit more interference than I'd expect from it, so I didn't like that. The other thing I didn't like is this big battery strap thing. It's just too big for these small batteries. It needs to be something, one of these ones with a buckle that you can go through and tighten and have something properly friction that you can really strap against, and that would be much better. But the main issue I've got with these quads in general, so it's not, I'm not picking on this one particularly, it's the SPI receiver. So when we started flying whoops like this trash can, and even power whoops became a thing, SPI receiver was absolutely fine. It would be fine in a house, you'd take it out, but you wouldn't go very far because it's a tiny little whoop basically. You might go just around a tree and stuff and that would be fine. Once you start getting into this, and this is like the 3-inch blades, so it's not unsubstantial, it's not huge, but it feels like you want more space, you want to explore, it's faster, and it just doesn't hold up. I was behind myself not a great distance, I went slightly behind a tree and that just took the signal out. That RX loss was enough to dump it down in a load of mud and just ruin my whole day really. Now if this had like an XM Plus or an RXSR, I wouldn't even fret about it. I'd be flying up and down quite happily. I'd be treating this like a bigger quad, because in some ways it's not as fast as a 5-inch or a properly spec 3-inch, but it's fast enough to have good fun zooming up and down, and even in a larger open field you can get some fun out of these ones, but not with these horrible SPI receivers and this tiny little antenna. Now this didn't actually have an option to put a receiver in there from the get-go. You've got this little connector that you can plug into, and I think it's built for an RXSR, and if you were going to think of this, I would absolutely say to budget in a proper external receiver for it, because as it is with that SPI receiver, it's just not good enough for what you're going to want to do with it, because you cannot restrict yourself for flying sort of 30 meters around yourself in a circle. That's not on. So it's a good quad, and it feels quite reminiscent of the Happy Model Lava X. Reasonably similar in terms of size. I think the Twig's coming up just a little bit bigger. As far as flying goes, this one did better. This absolutely feels like it's on rails. It did better than this, although this was a pretty good flyer. Crucially in this one, it does have the option to get it ready to fly with an external receiver, and that made an awful lot of difference. That was so much better, because I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to worry about it going down, and I could just treat it like a really cool quad to fly around in whatever space I felt like. And as these are the same price, I'd look between both of them, because this is certainly my favourite in this size range at the moment. Really nice quad, that. This is a nice quad, but it feels slightly tainted to me because of the amount of hassle I've had with it, and it's dropping mud all over my desk now. I really should clean it up. But anyway, a pretty good flyer. Don't get it wet, else it might go crazy. This has been the Eachine Twig, and was kindly supplied for review by Banggood. Thank you to Banggood. Sorry it's taken so long to get the review out, you know why now. Of course you can find links down below for this one, and I'll include the links for this one as well, because this is a cracking quad. Hope that review's been helpful, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.